And CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins us now. Charlie, always very good to see you. So much back and forth on all this. How much can we read into this initial assessment?
Well, Nancy, we got to talk about those words totally obliterated, completely obliterated, because the president and his secretary of defense have repeated that description even today. But sources tell CBS News there's no evidence to suggest that it was that bad. Certainly it hasn't been obliterated. It's not even kind of language that they use in traditional bomb damage or battle damage assessments. So again, they're saying it may have stalled Iran's nuclear program for a few months, like electricity and water was damaged, and the strikes caused two facilities to collapse. But I have to say the Defense Intelligence Agency hasn't been able to determine the whereabouts of 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium that may have been removed from those sites. At the same time, they're saying, they released a statement this morning saying, look, this is a preliminary low confidence report assessment. It's not a final conclusion. And importantly, they have not been able to review the actual physical sites themselves, which will give the best or highest indication.
Yeah, when you're talking preliminary, you're talking initial, plenty of questions still to be asked. When could we get a more definitive look at the status of that nuclear program then?
I can report tomorrow, actually. President Trump posted on Truth Social that Secretary Hegseth and other military leaders will hold a briefing here at the Pentagon tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. It's unclear how much more evidence they'll be able to provide. Again, these are preliminary findings. It depends a lot on how much intelligence gathering they can manage. It's been described to me as more of an art than a science. It relies a lot on satellite imagery. And since these targets, as you've seen, deep underground, that can only show so much. So you have to keep relying on intercepting phone calls and ideally getting someone on the ground. The head of Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, thanked commandos who have been operating inside Iran, we can assume they're still there, and thanked the CIA for their cooperation, too. So this is the kind of operation that will rely heavily on that kind of intelligence gathering.
Given all that, what has Iran itself said about its nuclear program, and has it said anything about what it plans to do next with it?
Yeah, so Iran's own Nuclear Atomic Energy Commission reports that the case of Fordo, anyway, the strikes destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the facility inoperable. So quite a lot of damage there. A foreign ministry spokesman admitted that 3 nuclear sites had been damaged, badly damaged in his words. But the head of Iran's nuclear program said Iran will recover from these strikes, will restore its nuclear program, which, again, they insist is in the pursuit of nuclear energy and not a nuclear bomb.
Charlie D'Agata, I know we'll be checking back in with you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now. And Nancy, thank you very much for being with us. We've heard a little bit about this at this point, but how has the White House reacted to this initial assessment on the nuclear program?
Nancy, there has been a sustained campaign from the president on down today to push back on this preliminary assessment and to argue that it is incomplete and that actually there is better intelligence out there that indicates that actually the damage to these nuclear sites was more severe. We had the CIA director put out a statement saying that there is new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source that he says contradicts what the Defense Department has concluded in this preliminary assessment. And he says that it was severely damaged. Now, again, severely damaged, still not the same as obliterated, but the president has been insisting. And the confusing messaging from the president here, Nancy, is that on one hand, the president is saying it's too early to know. This defense assessment is incomplete. And then on the other hand, he is saying with complete certainty that the facilities were obliterated, destroyed. It can't be both. And so the question has to be somewhere in between. The White House also touting some Israeli intelligence that indicates that the damage may have been more severe than what this preliminary assessment concluded.
Yeah, very good point there, Nancy. And the U.S. announced today it's set to hold talks with Iranian officials next week. What do we expect that to look like?
That's a great question, because we've been asking the White House all day after the president announced this at the NATO summit, who is going to be involved in these talks? What are they going to be talking about? So far, the White House has provided us with no details, and the Iranians haven't confirmed the talks either. the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said that the U.S. is seeking talks with Iranian officials, but we still don't know who would be involved from either side, what they would be talking about, whether the Iranians are eager to sit down with the U.S. just 7 days after their nuclear facilities were bombed by the United States. And so while the president is claiming that these talks are about to happen, we're still very short on details involving who, where, and when.
A lot of important details right there, too, Nancy. President Trump also wrapped up his trip to the NATO summit in the Netherlands today. It included a pretty big announcement on defense spending. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so he has been pushing European nations to contribute what he calls their fair share of spending to NATO for years. This is something that was a very big deal to him during his first term. It's still a big deal now. He's now pushing for every NATO nation to spend 5% of its GDP on defense. He has argued that the U.S. was footing the bill for NATO, that other countries weren't pulling their weight. And now NATO is announcing that nearly all, if not all, of the countries are on board. Spain is the one outlier, and the president had a lot of choice words for the Spanish government today. He said that if they don't fall in line, that he is going to punish them in a trade deal and charge them higher tariffs to make up for the dollars that they're not spending on defense. But nevertheless, the president views this as a big win, something that he has pushed for years, that now is coming to pass.
All right, Nancy Cordes, very good to see you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.